welcome to this new video interview for the Future of Healthcare. I'm here today with Christophe Joquet, a trend watcher in healthcare and self-care and healthcare marketeers. Hi, Christophe, how are you?
Hi, Rita. I'm fine. How are you today?
Fine, thank you very well. Today is a sunny day here in the Netherlands and it's really rare, so I hope to enjoy it this evening. Thank you for accepting this interview, and I think we can start with the first question already. So yeah, of course, first, can you introduce yourself, your career, your background?
Yeah, so my background is in pharmaceuticals. I started my career in pharmaceuticals, worked about 13 years within pharmaceuticals, and then about 6 to 7 years, and still today on the outside of pharmaceuticals, advising on strategies, mainly with basically all the big global pharmaceutical companies, actually.
Okay, and I see that you wrote a book called Health Enthusiasm. So how did you come up with this book?
So it's health enthusiasm. It's about making customers healthy and happy. It's a title that actually has a positivism to it because I really wanted to showcase how people more than ever have a huge enthusiasm to impact their own health. We sure all notice that. I mean, people are more than ever occupied with their health, certainly today in COVID times. But it's been going on for the past, I would say, 20 to even sometimes 40 years if you're looking carefully. And these days, in the past 2, 3 years, it really has exploded. And that's mainly because people feel like they can have an impact on their own health. Whether or not they're sick, they really want to have an impact on their own health. That's why they are moving a bit more. They are more careful about what they eat. They know how to sleep better. And so the whole book is about how does it come that people are more than ever so enthusiastic about their health.
Okay, and what are actually the key points that you want to pass to the readers of this book?
There's quite somewhat. I actually took 1 full year off to read the book, and there's a lot of things in there. I think, as I said, it explains why people are more than ever occupied with their health. And there's a couple of reasons to that. To briefly highlight some, I think the digital evolution or digital transformation that has happened in the past years has had a major impact on it, and not particularly because what technology can do, but mainly because it changed the expectations of people. I mean, today you can actually, if you want to write a book, you can write a book. If you want to bring out a CD, you can bring out a CD. If you want to travel across the world, you can do it. If you want to build a car, there's a ton of video clips on YouTube that will help you explain how to build a car. So people today, actually, they have grown accustomed to, becoming who or what you want to become. And slowly but steady, people have felt that same way about their own health. So they were looking for ways, for means, and they were expecting ways and means to actually impact their own health as well, because it's everywhere around them. And it really makes them want to have that same impact on their health and become healthy and happy. Because let's face it, if we think about it, the most important thing that we want for ourselves, but also for our family and friends, is health and happiness. I mean, at the beginning of the year, what do you wish to somebody every time? It's, I wish you a healthy and happy new year. So this is really the most important fundamental stuff in our lives. And so people really want it. And also companies have understood that they need to play into that. Because the actual needs, and if you look at the Maslow pyramid, for example, with the hierarchy of needs, then you'll see that the basic and the emotional needs today are largely fulfilled. So people are looking at the top of the pyramid, and there you have self-actualization. How can you become a better person? How can you become a more healthier and happier person? And this is the most dominant needs in society, Western society, today. And so I explain all of these elements in the book. And then in the second part of the book, I explain how healthcare companies, pharmaceutical companies, hospitals can actually go about this. Because if you really want to make that happen, if you really want to engage that person or that patient, you need to make sure that you don't only focus on the needs that you try to fulfill, but you also need to look at the expectations. How do people want those needs fulfilled? And so the book then explains largely what are the different elements that we see in other industries that
Mhm.
also could be and should be applied actually in the healthcare industry.
Okay. Yeah, I think that self-actualization is our hardest thing to achieve as a human being because we tend to always want more and need more, and we're never happy with what we got. Like we don't realize it that we're happy and we want always more.
Exactly, and there is a downside of it, of course. I mean, people are so much, or tend to go so much for more and even more happy and healthier than perhaps even possible, that you start seeing the opposite thing as well. I mean, I think in the happiness report that is published every year, I think 2 years ago, for the first time, was mentioned that one of the addictions that actually caused unhappiness is the desire and the persuasion that they need to be more happy.
Mm.
It's a little bit philosophical, but the fact that people are trying to do everything and even more than they actually can to be happy makes them unhappy. So you always need to balance things out and not exaggerate. But at the same time, I think it's a very good evolution that people are conscious and actually want to make a difference. And so, yeah, it's a matter of not going overboard, let's say.
And how did the public react to it? So, what is the feedback that you received? So, are your thoughts and concept been heard and followed or applied?
Yeah, I mean, I must say, everywhere I go, so I give a lot of keynotes around the world, and the most common feedback is, "Wow, this is the first time that we actually see a approach, a book, a strategy that does not look at a patient in a medical setting or a consumer in a lifestyle setting, but really like merges the both two worlds, because both of those worlds are coming closer together actually. They're blurring, the boundaries are blurring. There's a whole wellness industry in between, and it actually flows into the other industries as well. And so that is quite an exceptional proposition, and it looks at things in a whole different way. I no longer make the difference between a patient and a consumer. I actually say they're exactly the same person, but when they're a consumer or when they're a patient, they're in different situations. And so in different situations, you might have different needs, but actually your expectations and your life aspirations are exactly the same. And so that's why people are more and more looking for help in whatever situation they find themselves. Whether you are a patient, you are looking to solutions who are perhaps more health or well-being related, or maybe even lifestyle related. Well, if you are a consumer, you also will look for potential health medical solutions, even if you're not sick yet.
Mm.
DNA, for example, is a DNA analysis that can give you a prediction of whether or not you will be sick or you have a higher risk of becoming ill, is one of those things that consumers are doing even before they're actually ill. And they will adapt their lifestyle according to it.
Mm.
And the fun thing is, it, because you say that, what is the reaction to your book? It's sometimes hard to know your readers, because the book is publicly available worldwide actually. But I do have this weekly moment in my agenda, like every Friday afternoon, this Friday afternoon actually, I am opening my calendar, and I'm using Calendly. And so people can actually book a 30-minute meeting with me to discuss either health enthusiasm, their business, or anything related to health. And so every week, about between 5 to 8 people are dialing in, and most of them have read, this my book then. And so they really talk about it, and they have the post-its in there, and they give me the feedback, what they don't understand or what they want to apply to their business and really want to understand perhaps better. So I really get a good feeling of how people are are dealing with it and how people have lived this book across the globe. And it's funny because one time you call in with somebody from Virginia, which happened last week, and then so some other times you call in with a dentist from Germany, or a yoga teacher from Italy, or a personal coach from California. So there's a lot of diversity in my readers, just because it's, you know, speaks to a lot of industries, and it looks at the people and persons as a whole, not as a patient or a consumer, but as people who are occupied with their health. And so everybody who is remotely involved in health is interested in this book. And then when I get to have talks with them, it's really nice to hear. And the biggest compliments that they could give me is indeed that it is a positive book with a positive vibe, where you feel like you want to do something with it, because that was actually my biggest purpose of all, actually.
Okay, thank you. And I was wondering if you could explain a little bit more your custom-made programs. So from both the consumer business and the pharma medical business perspective.
Yeah, certainly. So I do approach them in different ways, but I have the same strategy that I go through. I mean, there's 5 elements to this. One is I try to make them understand what healthyism is about and what the actual impact is on the world and also on their business. The second part is that I will go and look in their market, but also beyond their market, how health is changing their customers' behavior. And when I say beyond their market, but what I mean by that is that I also look like in other industries to see whether there, if whether there is something happening in there that actually might impact themselves as well. And the third phase, I will then look at the relationships that they have with their customers. And by this, I mean, you can have a product or a service that you offer to your customers, but the question is, what kind of experience do they have with it? Do you really actually fulfill their expectations? And even more, do you know and do you fulfill their actual aspirations? Because those 2 elements to me are super important if you want to create value for your customers. So you really need to take into account the expectations and the aspirations. And then finally, I do some design sprint to create the right solutions and train the organization on how you can be more either patient-centric or health-centric, whether or not you're in pharmaceuticals or a consumer business. So it's a 5-step approach: understand, scan, define, design, and train. So those are pretty much the 5 things. And depending on whether I'm working in either consumer or pharmaceutical healthcare business, I approach different, it's the same way, but with different elements, I would say.
Okay. And yeah, the question that could not be missing from an interview these times, how do you think that COVID has impacted the healthcare industry? So have we learned anything from it?
I think we learned a lot about it. I'm working very closely with hospitals, and I think what hospitals have learned about it primarily is innovation. I think what we've seen within hospitals is that if you work together around a clear and one very obvious purpose, and you give people the authority to actually be creative and be innovative, then, I mean, you see things happening that you could have never imagined. I've heard hospital directors telling me that they've probably seen in 2-3 months more innovations happening in their hospital than in the 15 years before that. And that's all because we had this one huge objective that we could not miss, actually. I mean, it was so very much important. And at the same time, people were allowed the responsibility. There was no control organs, or there was no delaying. People wanted to execute. Now, if you look at the pharmaceutical company, because if you're talking about the healthcare industry, I think pharmaceutical companies certainly are part of that as well. I think what we see is that pharmaceutical companies, they have basically all eyes on them. I mean, whether it is for a vaccine, whether it is for the tests, whether it is for antiviral meds, I mean, everybody is looking to the pharmaceutical company. And I think this is a huge opportunity for the pharmaceutical companies. I'm not quite sure whether they are grasping it fully, to be honest, but I think it's a huge opportunity because pharmaceutical companies have been struggling with image and reputation. And so I believe that this is the right time to actually build and rebuild that reputation. I think it's important now for pharmaceutical companies to explain how medication is made, how difficult it is, what the scientific bases are to actually come up with a medication. Because all we hear always about medication is that it's too expensive and pharmaceutical companies are too money driven. But actually, if you've worked within the company, you know that the actual purpose of those companies is very sincere and that we actually help saving lives of people. But that doesn't come across like that. I mean, people, the reputation of pharmaceutical is not exactly good. And if you dig deeper into that, it's very often just simply related to the fact that they don't know the pharmaceutical companies yet. So this was and is still a very great opportunity for pharmaceutical companies to explain what they're doing, to show to society what actually their value is, and at the same time to also show and make a difference in society. Because it's not just by doing the things that you're supposed to do, between brackets, like putting medication on the market and making sure that the supply chain is safe, but you also could wonder, with all this medical and all this scientific knowledge within all those companies, how can we help society? How can we make sure that the knowledge that we have internally is spread out there and that people are a little bit more informed about this whole COVID thing than they currently are? Because one of the things that we can conclude for sure is that if people are not really living up to the COVID measures right now, it's because they are not well informed. And I believe that perhaps even pharmaceutical companies can play a role in that. So making a difference for society, on top of explaining what the actual value of the industry is. Because right now all eyes are on us. So this is what we should be doing, if you ask me.
Okay. And what do you recognize for the future of healthcare? So have you identified any potential sources of improvement?
Well, sources of improvement, I think there are plenty. I think what you need to be doing is making sure that you understand what is happening around you and that you know that you are ready to live up to that. And I think one of the most important thing, and this is again what my book is about, is people are more than ever occupied with their health. I mean, we've been talking about patient empowerment for probably the last 15 to 20 years, but we haven't seen anything yet. I mean, very often, whether we are in a pharmaceutical company or working in a hospital or as a physician, very often we still think that the physicians, the healthcare system, is at the center of the health of a person. Because we've always thought that when people are sick, they go to see a physician. And that's when they think about their health. But right now, today, what we realize and what we know is that people are managing their health even when they are not sick. They are eating healthily. They are looking to supermarkets to help them making healthy choices. And so instead of having a physician at the center of health, it's actually, we've lived the Copernican health revolution right now. And it's the patient himself who puts himself in at the center of his own health. And he will look into digital solutions. He will look into food, exercising, AI solution, apps. What may you have? I mean, there's a lot of things that are coming our way. And so the patient himself is actually in charge. And the physician is only one of the solutions that he has at his availability. And so this mind shift is radical. And it hasn't always been implemented or looked at from within the industry and such. And that's what I talk about in my book as well, is that let's make sure that we put the patient really at the center, and let's reflect upon how can we make sure that he feels that way and that we help them at the right moment, feeding into his expectations and his life aspirations. And then the second thing is certainly, we talked about digital. It's not going away. It will only become bigger. It will probably even merge with biology at some point. So we will have digital therapeutics that are very personal, that is precision medication. And so this is what we will be, what we have to deal with when we are looking towards the future. And all of this will be improvements if we listen to it and if we look at it very carefully.
I have one last question. That is, if you have a takeaway message for healthcare marketeers, what would it be?
I think I have two. One is very simple. When you're thinking about a patient, forget that he's a patient. Just look at him, the person, as a human being, and then reflect upon yourself. How would I feel? What do I find important for myself when I think about my own health? And if you start with that reflection and you build upon that and you create concrete situations that might relate to certain patients, then you will better understand how they are reflecting. But always start with what is important to yourself, what is the purpose of your company, and then go from there, I would say. And then a second one, and that's a very difficult one, but I think it's a very valuable one. And I really recommend everybody to take that time. I mean, it's really hard to do, but just take perhaps 15 minutes, not more, just 15 minutes, and think about what if you would restart today. Let's imagine that you would have to, like, for example, recreate a pharmaceutical company. Would you still do it the same? Would you create a medication and push it on to physicians and patients? Or how would you go about it? What is the real, actual best way to create a pharmaceutical company in the purpose that you have? So your purpose is making the lives of patients better. Well, how would you go about that? If you have a blank sheet, what would you do? Do it for 15 minutes. I would recommend to do it for a full day, of course. But if you just reflect upon it just for 15 minutes, you might find up with some really quick wins that you perhaps can already apply in your philosophy, in your approach, in your tactics, or maybe even your strategy already today. That would be my two recommendations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And yeah, so that was my last question, but I would like to thank you for this interview. And I hope, yeah, that next time will be either here in the Netherlands, either for you, like there in Belgium, in real life. Thank you very much, Christophe.
You're welcome. Thank you, Rita. Talk to you next time. Bye.
Bye bye.